Good morning. I'm just pushing out onto YouTube now, and we are there. So, good morning, everyone. I'm going to wish everyone a good day, and then we will get on with this. How are you, Jordan?
Exhausted.
Oh, yeah, what's going on?
I just haven't slept well the last couple of days. I had a bunch of blood tests done this week because all the hair falling out. And of course, I'm perfectly normal, so we don't know anything. But I think it was just pretty much not sleeping because I finally relaxed and went, well, there's nothing wrong other than I have a new hairdo. It's like,
Yeah, well, I guess it happens to lots of men, and
well, it's the
especially
whole,
in,
yeah, the whole beard is. I mean, I don't even, I shave like three hairs every other day. It's alopecia. The whole thing fell out.
oh, really?
Yeah, and it started over here. Um, and the gene is in my family. I mean, there's
Uh-huh.
been vitiligo or alopecia, but I've never had it. And who knows what triggered the gene to activate? Um, they they can kind of tell it's some kind of stress, but that's still vague. That's really vague. Like,
Everybody's got stress,
yeah,
man.
which stress? That's vague. Breath is stress. Breath is just a force applied. So I have no results, but I think I finally um, just kind of relaxed instead of just not doing anything until I had facts, and
Uh-huh.
that whole wait time can become a little burdensome. So just a little on the tired side,
Wow. Okay.
but
Well,
you know,
so the beard is never coming back then.
for now, and even these are thinning. So
Yeah. Well, my wife doesn't have any eyebrows, and I obviously have an overabundance of them.
you stole them from us.
And furthermore, mine have not turned gray,
Yeah, yeah, right,
which is a great surprise in a way. That all my hair has turned gray, at least on my head,
right,
except here.
right, right. Well, it's funny
So,
because with my beard, there was just that little, right here, it was still black, and my eyebrows were too, and up here, except, well, now
yeah,
it's kind of rested.
yeah. Good morning, Joe T. Welcome to our inner sanctum. Uh, we're going to read about Marvin Spiegelman, who is going to tell us about the impact of Jung and his red book on him. He was a training analyst in Los Angeles for many years. He died in 1917 or 2017, the year that this first edition, the first volume of Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, uh, by Murray Stein and Thomas Arst. Guess I have to give all the credits here. Published by Chiron Publications. And so anyway, one of his last acts at the age of 92 was to write this essay. So I guess he felt it was important enough to put some time into right at the end of his life. And we're grateful. So we'll have a discussion from here. All right. So, on the impact of Jung and his Red Book, A Personal Story by J. Marvin Spiegelman. Upon receiving an invitation to participate in this project discussing the impact of Jung's astonishing years-long active encounter with the unconscious in the Red Book, I was actually rereading that marvel and took this as a synchronicity, one encouraging me to accept the offer, despite being just 2 months shy of my 91st birthday. When I was permitted to be personal in my essay, I pondered whether I was being presumptuous or inflated, and decided that old age gave me leeway, plus the fact that I have been an avid reader of Jung since the age of 22 and an acolyte since undertaking analysis at 24. I will be showing similarities and differences in our experience as I am able. The large extent of the former is surprising, since almost all of my work precedes publication of the Red Book, and much of it is even independent of his memories, dreams, reflections. This suggests a common connection with the spirit of the depths, as Jung termed it, along with the along with the desired individuality emerging as a consequence. The main conclusion, providing a continuing inspiration for our time, is that the contemporary person in search of a soul can do no better than follow Jung's example to find the divine within. Um, Comments here before I go on?
I just appreciate his preamble to humanize it, and I like that he's 91 and he still has the curiosity and wonderment and doesn't have some I'm an expert hubris BS going on.
Right.
And he's very accessible and not pandering. You know, he's not dumbing down the language. I just feel here with his first paragraph, he just gave us an overview of where he's been with Jung in a simple, clear way. And honestly, I appreciate the personal tone, because it really goes with that inner divinity to find your own, and not the posturing of, you know, how many polysyllabic words can I utilize. You know, it's very, very, I really, this is a great first paragraph. Um it's readable. I just feel like he spoke directly to me and anyone else reading it. And I
Sure.
think that's a that to me is a testament to, you know, someone 91 years old, and he gives him leeway. Well, the leeway was he just relaxed and was normal, natural.
Yeah. And most of us are like him. We've had our experiences in life, our major experiences of life and individuation, before we were introduced to the Red Book. The Red Book is only 15 years old, or it's 115 years old, but it's only published the last um, 15 years. And so most of us did not know uh, anything about it. And even memories, dreams, reflections is, you have to stumble upon it. If you're a layman, you have to stumble upon it. And most of us on this YouTube channel are laymen after all. And so we are coming to the Red Book very much as Marvin Spiegelman came to it, as I came to it, as I think Jordan also came to it. We did not have any preconceived ideas about it, but when we read it, it spoke to us, is what I would say, is what I can say, I guess.
That was my experience directly. I mean, my architectural thesis was a house for myself. The thesis was the temple and man,
Right.
and I had never read R.A. Schwaller de Lubisch, and so this
Mm-hmm.
is coming up with my own idea. I named the house Pluribus, and then after the, you know, name was out of many, comma, one.
Mm-hmm.
And my professors, the head of the urban design department and the dean of the graduate school, my two primary advisors, they knew about Jung and they knew about R.A. Schwaller de Lubisch and the Temple of Luxor at Karnak and his Temple in Man, Temple of Man work. They knew of Jung's Memories, Dreams, Reflections. They said nothing my
Yeah.
whole thesis semester, and I was just on my own doing this house. And honestly, the self-discovery of me, I start to name a wall, for example, and go, well, what's that? And I would
Yeah.
explore it. And it was something directly related to age 4 or age 9 or, monkey bars or whatever. And right after I finished my thesis, I went back up to the studio and they both showed up. One of them hands me The Temple and Man by R.A. Schwaller de Lubisch, and the other one hands me Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And at that point, I had never even heard of Carl Jung. I'd been kicked out of the psychology department for asking PhD level questions in an undergraduate class. The professor just thought I was he's like, I think you're an imbecile. And I think, isn't it the opposite? I mean, but I didn't know that I had kind of kicked off of Freud without even knowing it, but didn't land on Jung until all of a sudden this book just appeared in my hand. So, yeah,
Jordan, we lost you after an undergraduate class. So could you say again what you said since
yeah,
then?
I was in this undergraduate psychology class, and actually the dean was teaching it, and he kicked me out of the class for asking PhD questions, and I'm going, what other kind of questions are worthwhile asking in a classroom? I mean,
Yeah.
but me being handed Memories, Dreams, Reflections, I didn't realize that basically that dean in the psychology department kicked me off of Freud.
Hmm.
Good, at that point in my life, good. But I
Yeah.
didn't land on Jung until I, walked across the campus and went to my thesis presentation, and then blah blah blah. Well, the fact that I was just handed Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and I just devoured it. I think I probably read it like 3 times in a row, and it was 5 years into architecture school. I felt like it was the first book that I ever read, other than Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, that just, it's like, oh, that's my kind of book.
Yeah. There's a wonderful recording of Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and I probably have listened to that at least 15 times. I really enjoyed it also, and have it in my veins. So, moving on. My own encounter with the unconscious, like Jung's, begins in early childhood. Shortly before my 4th birthday, I was seated on my little tricycle outside my parents' bungalow in East Los Angeles. Just awakening from a nap and a dream in the midday sun, I was powerfully made aware that I was a son of the sun, connected with God, and marveling at this fact, feeling that I was competent on the tricycle and could steer it well. The sun was California warm, and there was a glow in my body, too. In contrast, my mother was in the cottage, and she was dark and unpredictable. My later adult self could understand that this poor extroverted woman of 22 was cooped up while my father was working most of 7 days a week to support both of us, and with his brother, his parents, and his 2 maiden sisters. Uh, next, uh, Next door, though, lived my good friend Gracie, 2 years older than I, with whom I played every day, and we even attended kindergarten together at times. Her little cousin, however, scandalized me by scratching me for no good reason and even defecated on the driveway. Within within weeks, I moved away. Gracie, now a widowed mother, living in a home for the aged, would find me 80 years later. She, my wife, and I enjoyed a few lunches together, but alas, she died before we could visit our old neighborhood. This early sun experience of what Jung would later call abraxas was gradually forgotten, but I would remember it again many years later in the second year of my analysis when I was 25. More about that later. Before the before the recall of the Son of the Sun incident, in the first year of my analysis, I had severe, impressive to me dreams and visions, which began the construction of my youth. The first came after my first active imagination. In the waiting room of Dr. Max Zeller, I found several volumes, recently arrived, of the important Kabbalistic text, the Zohar. Opening one volume at random, I read a page and was startled to see that it strongly resembled my initial active imagination. I trembled as I went up to the office, but stayed away from reading that book until I was 40, only then discovering that one was advised against such study until one had indeed arrived at that age. The Kabbalistic tree of life was ultimately to be a central image for me. Shortly after that, I found a halt. I found a halt to my analytic work. I had the image of a great wall that blocked my way. My analysis suggested that I talk to this wall. Indeed, many years later, I would experience an intense numinosity when I visited the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and remembering that my mother used to say that talking to me was like talking to a wall, I heard a powerful voice speak. Where in the quote, where in the thunder of the name is the ghost? Go back to the place where you found the worm. Look for it there behind the tree. Holy man, hollow man, solo man, Solomon. Interesting, unquote. With this pronouncement, I called a dream that I recalled a dream that I had when I was around 11. At the time of first adolescent sexual arousal, I dreamed that I was about to have intercourse with my maiden aunt, the rather soft one, in comparison to with my mother's strength, when a worm crawled out of her vagina menacingly. Naturally, I was terrified, but spared this bit of incestuous union. This recalled dream, this recalled dream did bring me in touch with the phallic god of Jung, as well as the tree of life, as I was later to learn from the voice. So I could validate for myself these similarities to Jung's experience as revealed in the Red Book. Individuation, solo man, and overcoming external authority, hollow man, were hinted at as well. The recollection of my earliest experience, however, came a few months later, after I had spent a kind of hermit summer in vacation from the university and my teaching assistant job. I dreamed, quote, I was sailing the seas with Marco Polo. I was in the Merchant Marines in World War II. Then suddenly, in parentheses, I was in the Merchant Marines in World War II, when suddenly a whirlwind blew me into the underworld. I there encountered a huge snake, green in color, spitting yellow fire, and challenging me. I struggled with this creature. How I did so, I do not know, and ultimately subdued it. Leaving me utterly exhausted, I was then transported from this scene of intense color to a black and white background of a medieval European city. Suddenly a door opened and two knights dressed in green mail with a golden sun on their chests dragged me into a circular room with many people, including a loving French couple and my university professor. As I was brought into the room, I was beaten, and as initiation, not punishment, with the branches of a tree by each of the knights. Inside the room was a huge jewel-bedecked crown. Apparently, I was to be crowned. Recognizing that this crown was overwhelmingly large for me, I stepped back, at which a chorus said, "He is not worthy," or "He is too young," unquote. I wakened sobbing, remembering the first appearance of the night in me when I was on that tricycle, weeks before my 4th birthday. The rejection of the chorus devastated me, but I was mollified many times, many years later, when I discovered that the crown in Kabbalah was indeed larger than any individual and belonged to the highest sephira in the tree of life, the center, which the divine begins to come into manifestation. Yet the rejection was true in that my leadership role in life has always remained uncrowned, in the background, and subtle, good enough. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute. Go ahead.
I'd like to share a picture that's really apropos to
Sure.
his childhood experience of, why we climb trees, and then Jung said the first 40 or so years are just research, and recommended not to study the tree of life and the Kabbalah until you're 40, which I personally find is a rule to be broken, but you have to be told the rule to then go break it. So let me get this image. They moved
Yeah, I've made you co-host, so you can do it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, they there we go. They moved all my buttons. So there we go. Can you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so there's just the hopscotch game, the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
It's playing with the tree of life. So in a sense, you learn the tree, and then later you can learn the Sephiroth. And it reminds me, frankly, of a mimosa tree in our backyard when I was a kid. I would climb and I'd get to a point and I'd fall, plump right on my bump. And my dad came out and he said, "Here, let's do this differently. Climb up, go ahead." And when I fell, he caught me and I go, "I'll try again." He goes, "No, no, no. You know you're going to fall there. So now you know that. It's a crux. So let's put you there and let you learn the next part of the track. And once you get to the top, then we can start at the bottom again." But so he was basically honestly making shame and failure walk the plank. And because it was, okay, we know there's a problem point, or that's a hairpin turn, downshift and slow down and get into the brakes. Next time you do it instead of going off the track. But so it's interesting, just that kind of playful learning with his experience, when he was young. And then he comes over and then look at all the Hebrew and the paths and the Sephiroth. I think this image to me always strikes me. And her shadow is also on the hopscotch board, so there's it kind of such a cool image that I think goes with his text pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very interesting analysis there. Well, I certainly remember playing hopscotch like that when I was young, and of course, I never knew anything about the Kabbalah until after I was 60 at least.
I think even the hopscotch board is kind of that, left foot, right foot, both and, either or, both and. So there's this kind of coming and then coming to the top where it's all, where there's a kind of practice of, okay, work on your right, conscious, work on your left, unconscious, or reverse that, depending. And coming into being with literally how you navigate, how you hop how you walk. It's just it's such a wonderfully loaded image. I mean, the
Yeah,
hopscotch when you put it next to the tree of life.
right. Very interesting. Um, well, mine, I mean, I don't know that you ever quote unquote get over these things. The I just I didn't realize it until after I had given my granddaughter a painting that there's a snake emerging from the painting. Let me see if I can find that painting to show you what I'm talking about. Let's see. Goodness. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to show you my granddaughter's painting, and I haven't yet spotted the snake in it, but let me just see if I do. I think I have to increase the size. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not even seeing it anymore. Um, at least not from this picture of it.
It slithered away.
Huh?
It
No,
slithered
because
away.
I mean that's really interesting because um, when I first saw it, it was just overwhelming. And I said, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" You know, because I certainly didn't intend to give my granddaughter a snake, and yet that's what I had done.
It's
And
interesting that you saw the snake and now it's gone. And last Thursday, walking home, I found just a maybe 8, 9 inches long, but from a big snake, part of a snake
mhm,
skin shed. So just even the snake coming and then going, that you saw it and then now you don't.
mhm.
That's kind of cool because the living part of art.
Well, that is really a living part of art. I'm just trying to find the image before I framed it.
See if you can see it there.
Yeah, if I enlarge it or something. Uh, but no, I'm not. Now I'm not finding it. So
Well, that I really like how that aligns with, if I look up on a tree and do I see Mary Cassatt and Degas on a picnic or Einstein's crazy hair?
yeah,
And 5 minutes later, the sun moves and the shadows change, and I don't see either of them anymore. But there's that
hmm,
aliveness, I think, in art where even your perspective you pour in differently. And so when you saw that snake, there's that kind of surprise um, that you hadn't seen that before, and then now it's gone
yeah, and it was
or
a
hiding, snake in the grass kind of thing.
well, it's hiding, but it was a huge snake, and it was coming right at you with its mouth wide open. And yet I'm looking at it now in a larger image, and I don't see it at all.
Well, that's like the coming right at you with the
Oh, oh, maybe I do see it now. Okay, maybe I do see it.
well,
Uh,
the mouth wide open. That's like, the mode in God's eye, or be
yeah.
mindful your foot on the tail of the maw. I mean, when you
Okay,
gaze,
I'm gonna increase the size of this, and so that you can see what I'm talking about. And the snake is
oh
right
yeah,
here. There's the wide open yellow mouth, and the snake comes around here, but this is the head coming right at you
yeah,
with
yeah.
with
Like,
eyes and so on. So yeah, I do see it now. But I mean, it's interesting that when I first looked at this just now, I mean, I thought it was sort of an overwhelming feature of the image. And I said, "Oh my God, have I given that to my granddaughter?" And then uh, and now I couldn't find it until I manipulated it a bit. So maybe it's not so obvious. Um,
Well, and I think it's a wonderful, actually, I think it's a wonderful inclusion in that piece because it's, the snakes travel easily between the underworld and here. So they move
mhm.
between soul and spirit easily,
Yeah, yeah,
dark
yeah,
and light. And they shed their skin. They don't change, they just
yeah.
refresh the colors by, in a sense, power washing, the alt, so
Yeah. I finally picked up my really big piece. I've been working on a piece all year, which um I started, let's see, I can show you it. I've only completed the color part of it. And because it's taken until now, until yesterday, in fact, to get it this far, because it's 40 inches wide by 25 and a half inches tall. And so yesterday, before I started to do the Rocky, I decided to take a picture of it. And of course, it's hard to see very much of anything in this. And I'm not in love with it anymore, because I've done so many studies for this image. This image is called um, Vision of America. And I've done so many studies for it, over 25 studies, that I've given away some of them to my children and grandchildren, that I no longer really like this piece. But then yesterday I started to do Rocky on it, which is um, to put boundaries around the color. Every place, or many of the places where there's a color boundary, you put a black line between in the boundary. And so here's a very big close up of it, and you see this angry cat here.
yeah, no, that's clear.
which I thought was cool, and also this unicorn or unicorn-like thing with the horn up and the eye here, and oh, there's a lot of stuff here. Um, there's faces here. This guy with his mouth wide open, with his eye here, and then there's also this. If you take this as an eye, then here and go down to this as his nose, then that's something else again. And here's a guy with glasses looking to the left. Um, and I haven't gotten very far with it with the Rocky yet, but it's already got pretty interesting images emerging. So this is actually going to be a vision of America, because here's a guy with his nose, and here's his chin. And then here's a pair of eyes with a nose here and a mouth there. And then here's a guy. If, here's a guy with his stuck up nose. Here's his forehead to his nose, and here's his eye back here looking back. And so there's so many different ways to look at this, um, that it's going to be endlessly interesting for somebody who has this piece.
What's
Um,
interesting is the mouth wide open, where it's a gape, you know.
yeah,
But if
right.
I pronounce that spelling, that's agape love, which is,
Hmm.
the universal selfless, which means you are your self nature. So you get out of the way. And I think that agape and agape kind of
Hmm.
runs throughout. how the Participation Mystique is presenting here.
Yeah, with his mouth wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are only very, very small pieces of it. It's 1,000 square inches piece, and I've probably completed maybe 20 square inches so far. But I finally picked it up again. I had set it aside all summer. I started on it in January, believe it or not. And then I decided, well, maybe I should do some studies first because this is going to take a long time. And so I did the studies, and when I did the studies, I actually developed a new technique that I like better, and and I'm still stuck back with a few pieces. Like here's one here too that I haven't yet put Rocky on. And actually, this is the new style, I guess. Uh, this is where I'm letting the color run in it first, uh, without me drawing something very carefully.
That's
Um,
cool because you're letting the burn patterns in the color as they dry. They create these coastlines of lights and darks between them, whether they mix or whether they don't mix, and they create kind of that little wall.
yeah,
But it lets it let the liquid form the shapes.
yeah. So here's an interesting question from August Moon, and I'll address this question because uh, they say I think I remember that snake from a previous session. Interesting how the perspective shifted as of seeing today. I was just wondering yesterday what the snake symbol means in Chinese culture, and I've been very definitely working um, with the dragon, which is, I think, the snake symbol in Chinese culture. And the reason is that some of my students want to go back to a general school that has as its mascot the dragon, and my school is the phoenix, and this represents the masculine and feminine energies, the yin and yang in Chinese culture. I think the snake in Chinese culture is one form of dragon. And of course, um, these are things that they saw in the sky. So I think, let's see, I think I have okay, here's, I've been working on a phoenix here just for fun. It's not too well done, but anyway, that's that. But I wanted to show you something that my wife pointed out. It's been on my floor um, for quite a long time, and that is this rug, which has probably been on our floor for 40 years or close to it. Um, at least 35 years, if not more. And here's the phoenix, and here's the dragon, and you can see how this is on our kitchen floor, and I had brought this rug home from Hong Kong once when I was there, and so interesting.
That's cool.
Anyway, moving on. uh, Let's see. That was after seeing TV2 local news story about it. Mysteriousness is one aspect that came through in a reading I encountered. Wow, that's beautiful imagery. First time to see the dragon and the phoenix face to face. Yeah, well, they are face to face because the dragon and the phoenix have to cooperate. And interestingly, let me see if I can find it because, go ahead.
I was going to say, this memory is a little fuzzy, but some snakes have live birth, some hatch from eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting, I think dragons, mythologically, if I'm correct, dragons may hatch from eggs, and phoenix are born live because, in a sense, just literally emerging from the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about being born from an egg with a serpent is that when they're in the egg, they have that egg tooth at the tip of their mouth that they poke through to cut themselves out. So there's that metaphor of self-birth. And that is literally the first shed skin is the egg itself, the container. Mm-hmm. Then they are the vessel. And as they move through life, they continue to shed. So the phoenix sheds by being completely consumed and destroyed down to ashes, which is like the calcinaceo, the white powder. Just add water, poof, the fire comes back. Mm-hmm. Whereas then maybe the dragon molts and sheds skins rather than the creation destruction piece. So I think there's a nice line between live birth and then egg birth with serpents, with snakes being then dragon lineage or phoenix.
Yeah.
That both apply, I think, to us.
Yeah, I'm just looking for, there was Deb is getting into artificial intelligence, and so we bought a book because of the juxtaposition of the dragon and the phoenix in our schools. We bought a book from Amazon, Sight Unseen, and its story about the dragon and the phoenix was not really good, and so she went into artificial intelligence and asked it for the story of the dragon and the phoenix. And I'm just seeing if I can find it quickly because it's really worthwhile. And let's see. And it turned out that the whole story was written by an AI. And boy, I said, wow. Okay, here it is. I'll put up, I will put up the image again so that you can see the image I'm working with here. Yeah, this one. Okay, so Debbie put this into the computer and asked for an image of the dragon and the phoenix and the story of the dragon and the phoenix. And this is what the AI came back with. This painting, I don't think this painting exists anywhere but on Debbie's and my iPhones right now. It was just produced out of whole cloth by this AI. It's called MS Copilot that she's using. And so here it goes. The Dragon and the Phoenix, A Tale of Harmony. Once upon a time, in a land where the mountains touched the sky and the rivers sparkled like diamonds, there lived a mighty dragon named Long Wei and a graceful phoenix named Feng Huan. Long Wei, with his shimmering emerald scales and fiery breath, was known for his strength and courage. Feng Huang, with her radiant feathers of gold and crimson, was celebrated for her wisdom and beauty. Despite their differences, Long Wei and Feng Huang were the best of friends. They lived in the Valley of Harmony, a place where all creatures coexist peacefully. The valley was lush and green, filled with ancient trees, vibrant flowers, and crystal clear streams. It was a paradise, but it had not always been so. Many years ago, the valley was divided. The creatures of the land were constantly at odds with the once beautiful valley, and the once beautiful valley was a place of chaos and discord. Longwei and Feng Huang, um, seeing the suffering of their fellow creatures, decided to work together to restore peace. Lung Wei, with his powerful wings, soared high above the valley, keeping watch for any signs of trouble. His strength and bravery were unmatched, and he was always ready to protect those in need. Feng Huang, with her gentle song and wise counsel, brought calm and understanding to the valley's inhabitants. She taught them the importance of compassion and cooperation. One day, a terrible storm swept through the valley. The winds howled and the rain fell in torrents, threatening to destroy everything in its path. The creatures of the valley were terrified, and chaos began to spread once more. Long Wei and Feng Huang knew they had to act quickly. Long Wei flew into the heart of the storm, using his mighty wings to shield the valley from the worst of the winds. His scales glowed with a fierce light as he battled the storm, his courage inspiring all who watched. Meanwhile, Feng Huang sang a soothing melody that echoed through the valley. Her song was filled with hope and reassurance, calming the frightened creatures and reminding them of the strength they had when they stood together. Her feathers shimmered with a warm golden light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Together, Long Wei and Feng Huang's efforts began to turn the tide. The storm's fury lessened, and the winds began to die down. The rain slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the dark clouds parted to reveal a brilliant rainbow arching across the sky. The creatures of the valley cheered, their hearts filled with gratitude and admiration for Long Hui and Feng Huang. They realized that it was the dragon's strength and the phoenix's wisdom working in harmony that had saved them. From that day forward, the valley was a place of unity and peace. The creatures learned to appreciate each other's strengths and to work together, just as Long Wei and Feng Huang had done. The dragon and the phoenix continued to watch over the valley, their friendship a shining example of how differences could be a source of strength rather than division. And so the Valley of Harmony flourished, a testament to the power of courage, wisdom, and the beauty of working together in harmony. So there's one other. There you go. There it is. There's the valley with the rainbow.
That's two pieces there. I think that one, it's such a great story about learning the dignity of difference.
Yeah, sure.
And that dance. And then, prior to that, there's the actionable piece of coming to dignity and difference, which I find to be wisdom comes from experience, yet experience comes from very poor decision making.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here's when it was, turbulent and troubled, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And here they're trying to do their work. And here everything's turned wonderful again. And so it's just, and to think that this might have been done by artificial intelligence and not by any Chinese artist. It's just, oh my God.
Well, if you look too, actually, if you put the image back up, what's interesting, the as above, so below between the two, you get the phoenix and the hots, the oranges, the yellows, and that's the top of the rainbow. And then you get the dragon, and it's the colds, and the darks of the blues and the purples, and it's at the bottom of the rainbow. So even in the rainbow of colors, you have the phoenix on the top and the dragon on the bottom diagrammatically,
Mm-hmm.
and the arrangement of just even our color spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
the prismatic separation of the colors. So it's interesting, yeah. If AI made that painting, basically conglomerated images into one visual story.
Two paintings. It did two paintings.
Yeah, that one, and then the other one where there's the storm.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Well, if AI can do this, what do we need humans for? uh, okay, reading on.
Well, thing. I
Hmm?
think you can. There are three pieces to AI, maybe. Good, fast, and cheap, and you can only pick two. So if it's good and fast, it's probably not cheap. If it's good and cheap, it's probably not fast. But if it's fast and cheap, it's certainly no good. And AI is free.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Well, I
yeah,
mean, and that's really an enchanting story based on the idea of yin and yang.
yeah, it
And
really is.
uh, so, anyway, okay, going on. Jung's archetypal snake certainly emerged for me at this point, and the dream struggle has been repeated as it was for him many times indeed. The night, as we shall see, continued to be a central carrier of a self image for me later on. I now believe that my hero image, unlike Jung's, had me in search of God and was not to be overcome, as was his power driven Siegfried. This was confirmed later on, as we shall see. The dream also emphasized the tree symbolism, which was to be central for me in my myth. I here also encountered the phallic god, so important to Jung. These similarities seem significant to me, especially since this experience took place decades before I read Jung's book. A further difference from Jung's myth was made clear in a dream I had not long after this big one. It was during Christmas season. I had been humming the Three Kings carol during the day. I dreamed that night that a divine child was being born and that he was accompanied by three kings who were respectfully a Jewish rabbi, a Christian priest, and a Buddhist priest. This successor to the Christ child is now over 65 years old and has been my leader, co-pilot in analytical work, in authoring 20 books and over 100 articles, lecturing in 25 American cities and a half dozen foreign countries, and in living out what became my psycho-ecumenical myth. Later came more analysis, marriage, and a service as a medical service corps officer in the United States Army during the Korean War. I was then granted the GI Bill and fellowships, allowing me to study at the C.G. Jung Institute in Zurich. A high point of my life, attendance at lectures with gifted speakers such as von Franz and association with like-minded students from all over the world was a longed-for gift that satisfied me deeply. Lectures and a seminar with Jung, plus a final private session with him, wherein I received a requested blessing to match the familial one I had got from my Hasidic grandfather when I went to sea in World War II, made it all perfect. My final dream in analysis in 1959 was the following. I am wrestling with my analyst, C.A. Meyer, generating heat and light, at the end of which we bow to each other. I leave, saying goodbye to my friend, the secretary of the Institute. I then see my maternal grandmother, who points significantly to a one-room building open at the roof to a star-filled night sky above it. while sunshine fills the rest of the atmosphere elsewhere. Inside the building is a dark man sitting at a table and writing furiously, stopping at times to argue with God. Impressed, I am next on a ship. I am next on a ship wherein I am chief mate and serving a captain who is largely a presence rather than a person. We are amidships on a circular deck, which slowly rotates around the center. The ship somehow goes over the Alps to the Mediterranean and then sails around South America, arriving at the port of Los Angeles. The ship now becomes a truck, and we drive to Santa Monica, dropping off a sailor in Pasadena. On returning to Los Angeles with my pregnant wife, I was quite without funds and took a job, thanks to a friend I had assisted years before as a psychological consultant with a firm serving industry, something for which I was quite unqualified. This allowed me to start a practice and care for my family. I quit this job after a year, after dreaming that my wealthy Swedish friend, Mrs. Kate Hillman, Jim's wife, initially looked beautiful, but then haggard when she saw me using the telephone as part of my job, which was to find lush places to live for clients. When I told her that I was now used to this job, she nodded despairingly in the affirmative. Naturally, I resigned the next day, recognizing that acculturation was the sin. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute.
Yeah, that do
I
not
mean,
comply.
yeah, well, that's, you know, you can have your head spinning by a dream like that, obviously.
Well, yeah, but when he turns around and that she nods, so there's the yes. If you're not observant, you'll miss the fact that she nods despairingly, meaning
Mm.
she basically in the South, oh, bless your heart. It's a pity. And, and he noticed the pathetic piece of that. And I love the recognizing that acculturation was the sin, meaning, averaging yourself down, diluting yourself into mud as if you don't have your own piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean that is quite significant to me, it seems to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and to you, obviously, because um, that's what individuation really is about, I guess, that you can read all the books and follow all the rules, et cetera, but in the end, you have to be you. And
And every 4 years, people start acculturating to a side, and
mhm,
instead of being a capital O observer and what is the substance being talked about rather than who's got pom poms cheerleading to kind of rah rah get the pep rally. I mean, I don't want the sensational. I want the issue. And I think that's interesting now. I mean, between politics, medicine, diet, and money. I mean, where are the lies? Where are the substance pieces? And
yeah,
and then even no matter where I go, I, every 4 years, any kind of statement could be like personal suicide for your career or your life. I mean, every 4 years, leper colonies form. One's blue and one's red.
yeah. I would say that's true because what these politicians do is they keep picking various buzzwords or buzz phrases that'll mean something to a different group and keep throwing them in the pot, hoping that they'll
Yeah,
have enough stuff in the pot at the end of the day uh, to um, to win an election. And
right.
it's really getting tedious, actually, that, the talking heads um, are saying the same thing day after day after day. I started thinking, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, how can these people just keep doing the same thing or interviewing the same people with the same interview over and over and over again?
Well, if you look, I saw a video maybe last weekend, and it was two newscasters, and they say these words, and then another image appears, and it's two other newscasters, and they're saying the same words in sync. They went up to about they went up to about 40 pairs of newscasters saying the same thing. So
Yeah,
I have one word: script. Follow the
yeah,
money. Who
eh,
owns that set of media companies, and it becomes a Joseph Goebbels, you know, state a lie, make it big, repeat it. And the thing is, after a while, people, it's not that they believe it's true, it's the water they swim in. They can't see almost anything else. So
right, right. That's
discernment,
their problem.
yeah, discernment gets diluted and washed out the window. I
Yeah,
mean, so that's
yeah.
why it's important to be a strong swimmer. Yes.
What, I'm sorry for anybody that is studying for an advanced degree right now. And let me explain why. When you're studying for an advanced degree, let's say to be a surgeon or to be a psychoanalyst or um, whatever, being an electrician, let's say. Um, you study, 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 and it's interesting to study. It's very interesting to study. But when you finally start doing the job that you've been trying to prepare yourself for, um, you realize pretty darn quickly that you've just become a glorified loom operator, right? I mean, I used to work in the textile industry in part, and we had factories that had, I don't know, 80 or 90 looms in the building. Um, and there'd be a guy on every loom that kept putting the threads on and threading them through the equipment so that they would then make the pile weather stripping, which is what we were making. And that fuzzy stuff that you see going in the door and in a lot of aluminum doors, it's little tiny stuff like that. Um, and very narrow because it has to feed into the aluminum. Well, my company in Japan made 50 million meters of that a year. So it was a business, um, but if you're running that company, okay, so what? I mean, you're not a loom operator anymore, but in effect you are. You're the
You're,
guy.
you're threading that through the world, in the
Right,
big scale.
right, right, right. And that's one of the reasons why people are amazed with my history and why and how I have traveled so as much as I have. And it's largely because I got bored with anything else.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, you and I have a similar play bent here, where I mean, the two words I use to describe it are, wantrepreneur and entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
a wantrepreneur, 95% of the time, they're talking about what they might think they should prioritize to think about doing. And then the 5% of action is all over the place with no direction because they never knew what they were going to do.
Hmm.
Where the entrepreneur, The 5% research or thinking is simply turning in one direction, done, and 95% living it into being. And
Mhm.
so again, that's speaking to the advanced degrees piece, where you graduate from self into your life, and there's your entrepreneur. You're threading the thread through the world rather than
Yeah,
into
I
the.
mean, I really enjoyed going to school. If I could have, I went to school until I was 32 years old, and I actually did 10 years of higher education, believe it or not. And it was always an interesting challenge to try to get to the next plateau of this or that. Uh, and and they were very varied. Like I studied law for 3 years. I went to a liberal arts college and studied law, then studied business, which is all about statistics. And then I studied Chinese for a year. Okay, in an intensive course. And it was all interesting. I had fun doing all of it. Uh, but then in the end, I didn't end up using any of it. It was the most bizarre thing that even in business, and I was in business actively for about 40 years, um, or 35 years anyway, and I never used a regression analysis. I went to a business school that was 15 courses in statistics by different names, looking at things differently, but all with statistical analysis. And after actually went into business and started to do things in business, I never once in 35 years used anything that I learned in the classroom in my MBA program. I did learn three things in the school, but I never learned anything um, in the classroom that I could use.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I remember my fourth year. No, it was my fifth year, the fifth year part of the program. Well, I wanted fewer hours during my thesis for the last semester so I could focus on my thesis.
Mhm.
So I tried to take 23 credit hours on
Oh, God.
the semester before. Well, the administration in the architecture department, said absolutely not. I mean, 20 is way too many, but we'll approve 20. And so I laughed that I went, okay. And then I turned around and went over to the registrar and thought, well, what course can I add for 3 hours to get back to 23 without them knowing, but do it by correspondence?
Mhm.
And the strangest course I could see by correspondence was courtship and marriage. So, a relationship course, not in person. And so I picked that. But within the first week, I realized, oh, I really don't have time for all 23 of these, but I'll be damned if I'm going to drop any of them. So
Yeah.
also, my feathers go up in the back and I think, no, I'm going to do this. So I decided I needed to pick two classes, and on every test, on every essay, I would not have read any of the text. And all I would do is try to literally write down Piaget's 3 steps to learning, apply it to the title and the words in the question, and write an essay, total BS, on that, because then I could eliminate studying for 2 classes and I still got A minuses. And I laughed that they're like, wow, it was such a left field approach you took to that question. I really love what you came to. And it's almost like you transcended the book. And I just so, oh, well, thank you very much. I hadn't even opened
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was, to me, I mean, how can I strategically not quit part of this, but still appear to perform? And
Yeah.
it's such a superficial thing, but I still laugh that that I tried to figure out basically how to skip class by going to class. So anyway,
Yeah.
but speaking to your business stuff, 18 courses in statistics, all different titles, same thing. Acculturation as a sin. It's
Right. Okay. So moving on.
yeah.
Okay. So we're back in Dr. Spiegelman's dream here. The captain, now a person, and I then reached the Pacific Palisades and looked out across the Pacific Ocean, watching the sun rising, contra naturam, in the east. I thought of the land of the rising sun, but also saw that a woman had died in a fire nearby. This dream was also predictive. Not only did I, the sailor, take a job in Pasadena when I returned, but only months later, in the fall of 1959, when I was teaching at UCLA, a Fulbright scholar from Japan, Hayao Kawai, came to work with me in analysis for the next 2 years. He then returned to Japan, completed his doctorate, and went to Zurich to train. He subsequently founded Jungian Psychology in Japan, trained many, and was even appointed to a post in the national cabinet. Dr. Kawai referred a number of men and women from Japan to me for analysis over the years. I visited and lectured there several times and was most cordially received. Land of the rising sun, indeed. Furthermore, also, the flame-torn woman of the dream occurred in time, connected with a tragic analytic work in which I was engaged. All survived, thank goodness, but with great distress. An ending of my personal Jungian analysis took place in 1963 when I returned to Zurich for, as I put it, my 100-mile check.
100,000 is it? Oh, your video froze right when you said 100.
From which emerged a hero figure.
Your
He
video,
grasped,
your video
pardon?
froze right when you said 100, getting onto the
Oh,
100,000 mile. It froze right
okay.
there.
I'll start that paragraph again then. So an ending to my personal Jungian analysis took place in 1963 when I returned to Zurich for, as I put it, my 100,000-mile checkup. After 2 weeks of intense work, I had a dream that led me to a series of paintings. I began with a forest scene and a central tree from which emerged a hero figure. I grasped a branch, phallic in nature, and proceeded to traverse cities, deserts, and seas in search of a way to deal with that energy, finally planting it in the earth under the eye of God. Lightning and thunder then came forth from the eye, terrifying, yet tears then poured forth also, watering that stick compassionately until it became a beautiful tree. The eye then fell into the center of that tree, which changed into a mandala. This then was my sign for ending personal analytic work. 3 years later, my relation with my local analytical society came to an end when I resigned in protest against what I felt to be serious injustices. I returned 14 years later. At the same time, I began studying Kabbalah in earnest, now the age of 40, and I dreamed significantly again, now with the knight in warrior mode, dressed in black, with the golden sun on his chest. We were in a field of battle, I think in Macedonia, which reminded me of Philip, the father of Alexander. The knight told me that he no longer had a cause to serve in the outer world, implying Jungian psychology. I sadly agreed. Shortly thereafter, I was engaged in an active imagination wherein for some months I had been in a cave with an old wise man who did not speak, a woman, and a young boy. Suddenly the knight appeared and rode off with the young woman. When I caught up with him, he explained that he was trying to get my attention. He and some others like him had stories to tell, not just for me, but for a larger public also. Would I be willing to join him? I had always had an interest in writing, so I was intrigued. I told him that I had a wife and children, plus a busy practice, but could devote Wednesday afternoon and much of Saturday to such work, and the knight agreed. For the following 4 years, I was passionately engaged in writing these stories, enacting the dream figure, producing 3 large volumes called sequentially The Tree, then The Quest, and finally The Love, later published as Passions of the Soul. The first book contained stories of 10 different people representing different religious or spiritual attitudes, all ultimately finding their own symbol of the self on the tree of life. The first story was that of the knight himself, a Gnostic tale of being called to help restore the unity of God. The Humpty Dumpty confronted in his, her, its fragmentation and requiring total effort of union of man with himself and with the divine. The second story was that of a Muslim Arab overcome with guilt, sailing the sea to find redemption for his transgressions. The third tale was that of a Japanese Ronin, a samurai warrior without a lord, and using the Zen ox herding pictures as a structural guide, achieved Buddhist Satori. After 3 stories of men, the tree continued in presenting 3 tales of women. The first, Julia the Antichrist communist, or the atheist communist, a psychologist, sought redemption of her work of maternal capacity in the land of Israel, achieving her own individuation as well as generativity. Following Julia came the tale of Sibylla, the nymphomaniac who had to reconcile strands in her psyche of warring nations and religions, causing uncontrollable lust in her sexuality, finding redemption in the desert with an equally troubled rabbi, and then bringing healing to others. This polytheistic tale was followed by the story of Maria the nun, whose incestuous sexual transgression and struggle with her faith also found redemption in the desert. Okay, I'm going to stop there for a minute. Wow. Okay.
Well, I think to move past the sensationalism of sexuality, to look at the sexuality. This is a lot of people going within themselves, going in within the family. But the problem is it's metaphorical, and it almost can't not come across as literal. And that's what's disturbing, I think, because you got to crack the egg of the literal to get to the lesson. But to do that, you can't. What's been seen can't be unseen. So you're kind of, you're in a sense nipping on poison to get to the cure.
Well, and this is essentially what happened to me, where I thought I was writing a novel, and it started to become very sexual and then pornographic. And I kept going with it because I had to. I didn't have any choice. My psyche wasn't allowing me to stop. But um, I later, when I finished that novel, I put it in a drawer for 16 years because I didn't think it was a good idea to put it into the world, given that I was in a business career and I didn't know
Well, yeah,
where that would
that in
take me.
itself, yeah, that in itself, I mean, there's discernment there. There's also legitimate fear. I mean, and you don't want to self-sabotage. But there's also, I think, in the big picture, it brings out the difference and that they are distinct, or there are distinctions between the creative drive and the sex drive. And if you look at a lot of healers, they often have a huge amount of sexual energy. The problem is when they subject people they're working with to that, it's no longer healing, it's manipulation.
Yeah,
And so, I'm not going to take a moral line here,
yeah,
because morals seem to be cowardice. But there's a piece, I think, where when we get going, I mean, you get the creative drive really, really warmed up and going. Well, you're literally aroused in life. So go figure that the sex drive's going to arouse as well. So, I mean, they start distinct and then they can come together. But I think understanding what is creativity working from within to externalize versus what is sexuality that comes from
hmm,
within to externalize. I think here there's this message, I think, between the creative drive and the sex drive. And not that they have to stay separate, but to understand that neither has to be at the beck and call of the other. You don't, as in the lust being consumed by your desire kind of thing.
yeah. Um, okay, Ed, do you want to do some reading now?
Yeah.
We're at final four tales. I'm going to take a quick bio break and I'll be right back.
The final four tales were first that of an African American writer meeting his soror mystica, sacred sister or mystical sister, in Ethiopia, and engaging with her in an alchemical journey. Second, Maya the yogini undertakes a full Kundalini work alone with her inner guru. Third, an old Chinese man dialogues with the I Ching in Taoist fashion. Fourth, Sophie Sarah, a medium, dialogues with God about the Holocaust. These 10 seekers meet in paradise, finding their individual self symbols on the tree of life. Some individual psalms round out the work. Hardly had this book been completed when a second figure, calling himself the Son of the Night, appeared with a new book. He was the initial boy of the cave and started out on a path to find his mother, accompanied by Dog. This book, in contrast to the individual paths of the tree people, was a work in pairs, exploring Greek and other themes, resulting in divinization of Dog and a resolution of the questions and uncertainties in that cave. The two nights of the big dream, when I was 25, thus fulfilled the initiation begun at that time. With this completion of the book of the Son of the Night, there appeared yet a third figure who called himself the grandson of the night. His book was initially called The Love, later published as Jungian Psychology and the Passions of the Soul, and undertook an exploration of that theme in literature. Example given, Don Juan. Fairy tales, example given, Bluebeard, and religion, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, polytheism, concluding with a kind of magical mandala, incorporating all of it in a tree of life Kundalini diagram and schema. As one can see, this 4-year journey of active engagement with the unconscious parallels Jung's intense involvement, but as he would also desire, it is my own, and despite many similar themes, is quite different from his. First off, as I have already mentioned, the hero was not destroyed in my case, but employed. I saw it, finally, as if my ego was stationed at the lowest point of the tree of life, Malkuth, and looked up the middle pillar to Tiferet, abode of the self. I could then inhabit the ladder and go and undergo the adventures above that Sephira or beneath it, that Sephira or beneath it, at the physiological centers, via my heroes and heroines. I understood these qualities of the ego-self axis the way that the Buddhist master Christmas Humphreys describes as ego, self, and capital SELF, self, with the first two, ego and self, as belonging more to the individual, and the last, all capitalized self, as totally collective. Furthermore, my attitude was like that of my final dream when I was in training. Namely, I was first officer or co-pilot to a captain who was both abstract and a presence, but also very human as we undertook the voyage together. I was no mere amanuensis, new word. A recent dream of mine helps me to understand my difference from Jung. In it, Elijah the prophet appears and says that he has things to tell me. An active imagination, he told me that his appearance in Jung's work was accurate for him, and that the latter's task was to overcome all the authorities, holy men, to arrive at a full apprehension of the God within. But he, Jung, was wrong about the prophet being transcended. He fell victim, Elijah went on, to the prejudice of the monotheism, less so now in Judaism, that their belief superseded the earlier dispensation, forgetting, for example, that I reappear every year at Passover time to each and every Jewish household to enjoy wine and reminding all to welcome the stranger in every sense of the term. For Jung, all authorities rightly had to be overcome for him to mightily demonstrate the role of the individual fighting and forming the divine within himself. But that is not true for your myth, which has a Jewish root, in contrast to Jung's Christian root. Finally, Elijah called to mind that he spoke of God appearing, not in earthquakes and fire, but as the still, small, inner voice. Anticipating Jung? These comments of my inner Elijah reminded me of what great medieval Jewish physician and theologian Maimonides said to his pupils when they queried him as to why God went on to choose Christians. Maimonides replied that God wanted to spread the monotheistic idea and presence and needed to do so with others who had little or no similarity with the psyche of the Jewish people. I was also mollified with the realization that of that prejudice when my paper on Jung's answer to Job 50 years later was greeted, that's the title, Jung's answer to Job 50 years later, was greeted with disdain when it was sent out for comment. In that paper, published online, I suggested that the Holocaust may have indeed been a crucial event in the inauguration of the new eon. I noticed that the 6 million murdered Jews may have constituted a symbolic multiplication of the traditional 600,000 who heard the word of God at Mount Sinai. That initial collective experience of the divine was followed by an individual dispensation in Jesus for the then new eon, further realized in depth by the knowing of God within via Jung. It might now also be seen as a possibility of a forthcoming collective experience of the Godhead. The number 600,000 to 1 to 6 million with the factor of 10, 1 and 0, seemed potentially significant indeed. The combination of dismissal and vitriol suggested that I might have struck a nerve. Jung surely showed us the revolutionary view that the projection of the God image could be retrieved and transformed back into the individual soul. Why, then, is the possibility of there once being a collective vision so threatening? After all, many religions await a first or second coming of a Messiah. Do they not? Perhaps achievement of the God within is still not strong enough to withstand an addition. I'll stop.
Yeah.
I like it. He's really rogue. He went his own, damn the torpedoes. It's like,
yeah.
We don't have to use those. So it's like, no, that's not really what that phrase means, but applying it here. Yeah, he didn't go out. He didn't go out on a limb. He went out on a whole tree on a limb. I mean,
yeah. Well, and I think that's what's really significant here is that he's talking about whole peoples, okay, as in terms of the development of God and the God image. And, and not only that, but many other things as well. I mean, the collective unconscious is a manifestation of God, and it's a global affair. I mean, we are 8.5 billion strong sort of cells in that gradual development. So we could say that until we can get everybody to wake up and say, what is it we're doing to ourselves? We're still going to have a lot more wars and so on, because everybody thinks it's my way or the highway, and that's not the way it is. in truth.
I love the way you pull this in, because to me, there's the collective unconscious that's, hey, get with the program, aka slavery. Everyone thinks the same thing, versus I'm like, no, I created my own program. And once you create your own program, then I'll get together with you, because neither of us will need to compromise. That's the difference. I mean, between, I guess, the sheep live their life in fear of the wolf, only to be eaten by the shepherd. It's like, so it's, I think, seeing through it's not a matter of having the same thinking. He really brings up the difference between his Jewish root and Jung's Christian root of the tree. And those are two different trees. They're going to grow two different things, and they may arrive at the same place, but the process in between is not the same at all.
Right. And
how do we keep distinctions present in a collective while having a collective altogether?
Well, the first thing that has to happen is everybody's been facing away from each other. We have to all be able to face each other, all of us, all human beings, and figure out what works and what doesn't work with as little competitiveness among macro ways as possible. And what Jung, he didn't start it, but he certainly recognized that it was already happening in it was already happening in Europe, and uh, there have been ecumenical groups going way back, and there have been the opposite of that, which is people who dug in their heels. I mean, in the West, it was traditionally the Pope and the Calvinists, um,
Mm-hmm.
both digging in their heels and having their own way. And then the Calvinists kept dividing because they couldn't even agree on what Calvinism was.
Well, that's a good point because it reminds me of the quote, when we separate our warriors from our scholars, we will have laws made by cowards and battles fought by fools. And you have to have both. And instead of that squabble, 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 the one who's strong and the one who's weak, or the one who's strong and the one who's intelligent, Beauty and the Beast, might and who's got the muscle and who's got the management.
Yeah, we have to remember the dragon and the phoenix,
Yeah.
right? And what is the phoenix but the firebird, right?
Right.
Which is if the phoenix gets out of control, uh, she'll spin right down into death, literally. As who was it? Mozart who wrote the piece. What was the piece? What was the piece that caused fistfights in the?
Cyberflute?
Huh?
Is it the Cyberflute? No.
No, the
Oh,
Firebird Suite. The Firebird Suite. And I think that's by Mozart, but it could be somebody else. But it's the Firebird Suite where everybody wanted to see this ballet with a beautiful woman playing the Firebird,
mhm.
right? But they went to the concert, the opening, and you know about the middle of the suite, there are fistfights in the aisle at the opening. And if you know it, folks, if you haven't listened to the Firebird Suite, you owe it to yourself to take a listen for 15 minutes or half an hour, because you'll see immediately what I'm talking about. It it just it's so destructive that it gets the audience worked up and wanting to fight with one another. Um, and and then of course at the end of it, you resurrect, you rise up out of the ashes, and you say, okay, what just happened? Right?
Well, and even in the word Firebird, I mean, fire is really, the definition is anything united with oxygen. Well, air is required for lift and flight. So, in a sense, the Firebird, I mean, the bird is the air element, and the fire is obviously the fire element,
Yeah.
and it self invigorates. The Firebird self fuels air,
Right.
and so it's interesting to me within the Mozart's Firebird Suite, it's going to self fuel everyone to explode, and and you just go pretty much
Yeah, I
out of
mean,
control.
yeah, I mean, of course, uh, I think, excuse me if I'm being a little irreverent here, but I think that ballet had its origins in medieval pornography. They couldn't,
It
they,
could
they,
be. I mean,
yeah,
it,
they couldn't have people fornicating on the stage. So what they did was dress them in skimpy outfits and let everybody's imagination go wild. And so I just want to see if.
Well, and actually, the masking of truth, or whether it's prude or just natural, if you look at, I think, some Greek tragedies, I think, I don't have a whole lot of basis, but I think, and I probably should check out the credibility.
It's Stravinsky. It's not Mozart. It's Stravinsky.
Stravinsky.
Right, but and it was a prelude to World War I, as I recall. That Stravinsky had, at least unconsciously realized that there was going to be a war. I mean, it wasn't only Jung, but a lot of artistic types were producing things that were disconcerting because the times were disconcerting.
Well, in
And
your ballet there, example, pulling in life, unbridled life, into that as ballet, so they could show it on the stage, kind of parallels some of the Greek tragedies where when they had a criminal who was going to be executed, they would put him on the stage as the character who's going to be killed, and they would actually kill him on stage.
mm-hmm.
And that's it's not something that we do now, honestly, but not on the theater stage. It's on the world stage.
Yeah. And so there's something in that suite that is so discordant that it literally gets audience members wanting to get to their feet and start trading punches and such. And that is exactly what did happen at the opening. And so the point, and I think if that happened to you, you would look back on it and be rather surprised, right? And and you would have gone to the ballet, perhaps thinking that you were going to see a beautiful woman do a dance, a rite of spring. Oh no, it's not the Firebird Suite. It's the Rite of Spring. It's the Rite of Spring I'm thinking of. And I just have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure it's the Rite of Spring, which might be part of the.
Well, that of summertime when the living is easy, and that take that whole song.
Yeah, the Rite of Spring is also by Stravinsky, so it's the same sort of, comes from the same whole cloth. But it was the Rite of Spring that caused people to go to start fights in the audience. And
so they all came out of themselves. They all emerged from the egg of calmness, and boom, birth.
Yeah, and so the Rite of Spring in the metaphor is when we send all the soldiers off to fight in the springtime and they all come home at Christmas time and it's cold and wet and stay home in the winter, right?
Out of frying to the fire. It's like out of the misery of war into the misery of winter.
Right. And so, I mean, it's like my joke about the 80 Years' War, that the 80 Years' War was the Spanish coming up to Holland every year to try to pound the Calvinists back into Catholicism. And at the end of the growing season, the Dutch would flood their country, and the Spanish would go home to sunny Spain for the winter,
Right.
and that finally ended in 1648 uh, with the Treaty of Westphalia, which I don't know what the Treaty of Westphalia said, except that it was the end of the 80 Years' War. And so the point is that we can go on bashing our heads back and forth against one another, but the reality is that all human beings are more or less the same from a DNA point of view, except for a few minor things that make for our differences in personality and appearance and that sort of stuff. But, all human beings have hearts, lungs, breathe the same, etc., have brains, and so on. So our differences, I think I saw a special one time that said that our differences come from only 1.5% of our DNA, something like that. And so what we have to do, and Jung recognized this, but how to get it across to people, that's the question. He recognized that we have to learn to come together. And, the place that's happened most efficiently is the United States and Canada to a lesser degree, where we've accepted people of every race, color, and creed in the United States from every country in the world. And after 5 years, they're American. They do change. They psychologically change and see themselves as American, not as whatever they were when they first came. Um,
Well, the
and
emergence that happens there, I mean, the emergence of the person, notwithstanding their previous acculturation.
right,
And I think what's primarily interesting, one of to me the healthy interactions, rather than comparison energy, which is often really negative, or
mm-hmm,
competitive energy, which, oh, that's cool, but that's for invigorating your muscles of the mind, but not for who's going to win and lose. I think when the individual loses weight, the weight of other people's opinions,
yeah,
then you can have conversation like you and me. We don't always agree on anything, but I don't really remember us squabbling because we can hold two ideas and discuss them that maybe neither of us even believes it, and it's
yep,
not a lie. It's intellectual gymnastics and exercise, intellectual calisthenics, and that's a way to keep the garden fresh. And the individuals then don't try to win and lose. And I don't see you and I compromising either, because to me, true compromise, both people are equally disappointed. And, why would I want to mute someone else's views that I care for?
yeah,
And there's a
yeah,
point of how can we both keep our intensity and work it together? I mean, the gas and the car, so to speak.
right. And well, very true. Uh, let's see. So the point is that, in this country, we do have our conflicts all the time, constantly. They play out on our television screens nightly. Maybe they're enhanced and continued because of television. I don't know. Um, but on
Or
the other hand, if we didn't have television, it would take longer to get the word out, I suppose.
yeah,
Um,
to start the fight. It's like, or
yeah,
like, right.
because in the end, you have to have the dispute. Okay, the dispute is necessary to resolve differences. And I'm just thinking of a coffee cup that I was looking at this morning that's in my shelf that says, if a man speaks in the desert and no women hear him, is he still wrong? And the answer is yes. Right. Uh, because, all of us at some point or another have um, disputes with our spouses, right? And usually it's like some sort of rainstorm on a sunny day, or a rain shower on a sunny day, and it washes away after no time at all. I mean, my wife and I disputed a couple things this morning, and I can't even remember what they were.
Well,
But
and I think that's a good example too, because I think it's not a matter of who's in control or who's dominant or who needs to acquiesce. Sometimes people say what they feel, but it's not what they mean.
yeah,
And that confuses the other person. And what happens is it gets squirrely because what they meant was absolutely not what they felt. And there's an inner conflict of how it's even communicated. So then you're responding to something that's actually irrelevant to them. They said it, but it's not what they meant. And,
right.
or are they going to then master the strategy and, like a wonderful Spencer Tracy criminal
Well,
attorney?
and it doesn't have to do, while we may have differences in perspective with our spouses, um, it doesn't have to do with their marriages. And
Yeah.
people have to understand that. Usually. I mean, sometimes it becomes so serious that marriages fall apart. And we have 50% divorce rate in the United States. I'd like to see that be less, but um, maybe we can't as a species yet. Um,
What?
we're not mature enough yet, perhaps. Um,
I kind of feel that when, especially with couples, I see this at my table all the time. When I can help people understand how to have conflict without drama, and their anxiousness, their avoidance disappears. And I usually tell them, look, argue in the car because you can't escape at 70 miles an hour. So you're not going to be abandoned,
mhm.
or you're not going to be um, encroached on. You both have your seatbelts on. You have your own seats, but you're in the same egg traveling down the highway. And just don't drive over half a tank of gas. So you can make sure you can get back to somewhere to fuel up.
Yeah.
But the conflict, the ability to have conflict, but without drama, it's basically mellow, but not melodrama. So it's
Right.
no less intense, but it's important to dance those things out. And
Right. Well, I'll
and
tell you
so
what,
often kind of
what
a
has
dance.
been hugely helpful to my wife and me is understanding duality, and duality as it's presented in the Myers-Briggs, because our main difference is that she's a very judging person and I'm a very perceiving person. And so, basically I'm always wrong. However, uh, I wait 5 minutes and then I'm right. Right? So,
There's the whole cycle of, it's like ruminating on perspective rather than
yeah,
ruminating on what caused drama. I mean,
right.
yeah.
So I'm going to call this to a halt right now. I guess it's not that much longer, but I can't make another
Well, yeah, this is, I'm kind of getting your sleepy too. It's contagious, but
hypnosis. Yeah,
yeah, when I was reading, I started to
starting to understand my hypnosis problem.
Well, yeah, I'd come up on a word like, Maimonides, and
Yeah.
I'd stop and go, okay, how is that pronounced again? And so
Well,
didn't
yeah,
have quick
George C. Scott and Patton pronounced it Maimonides,
Maimonides.
Maimonides,
There we go.
Maimonides. But anyway,
Well, that's the cool thing. If with George with Patton, um, it didn't matter if it was right or wrong. He could say it forcefully enough that it just made it true.
we're true enough for today.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And so we'll finish with Dr. Spiegelman next week.
Cool.
And I hope it's not quite as much navel gazing as this has been for of his, because you know I'm I haven't found his recitation of all his works uh, that interesting
Well,
personally.
it's interesting to me. I really cherish the first paragraph,
Mhm.
then not the rest, because he's basically saying, "I'm different, like everyone else." so,
Yeah, right.
so
And with all due respect to his life's work, which was obviously important to many people, um, it does induce sleep.
yeah, it's a long.
However, if you're feeling asleep, ladies and gentlemen, please, as you're going about your business today, please do listen to um, The Rite of Spring. It'll wake you up and help you understand what it is we're talking about. And the Firebird Suite also has the same thing. In fact, I think the Rite of Spring might be part of this Firebird Suite. I'm not sure, but in any case,
Well, and it does come across as a diary entry where, yes, it's important to do it your own way, but then this is then the long-winded survey of, oh, look how I did it
yeah,
differently. And
yeah,
it's important for some people to see, but doing it your own way, well, do it your own way.
yeah. Let's see. Well, what's come across on my cell phone in the last 5 minutes is a text message from my longest friend in life, who I met on January the 23rd, 1962, if you can believe that. That's a long time, 62 years. And and he's still texting me back and forth. And his wife is texting me too on completely different topics, but both of them have become, by texting, um, have become close friends to my wife as well. Um, and and they live on the other side of the continent. They live in northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and we rarely see them. I saw Ray in 2022. He came to Helena for a short visit. Um, but everyone needs to think about how you can still have friends 62 years later. Whoever you meet, I mean, whoever you meet, whatever your age, try to imagine having that friend for the rest of your life, knowing that person for the rest of your life, and how will you behave? Um, and you know, my friend Ray has had a Northwoodsman experience of life that is beyond belief, and yet, uh, and and it's totally divergent from my life to include he went to Canada to avoid service in Vietnam, and he did all kinds of things, and met his wife because he was running a pile driving crane on a barge in the Columbia River, and she wanted a dock. And so he was pounding the piles for her dock, and somehow they hit it off and ended up having been married now for almost as long as Debbie and me, or as long maybe. And she's a very unique woman because Ray is her second husband, and her first husband was 30 years older than she was. And she decided, I mean, this is individuation. At age 22, she decided to have her tubes tied so that she could go and live in the woods with her 30-year-old older husband, 30-year older husband, and study the North American cougar. And they lived in the woods of British Columbia, just observing the cougar for 10 years. And then he died. And then she came out of the woods, but she's still at near my age. She's still probably the leading expert on the North American cougar in the world, I would guess. Especially since her husband isn't still alive. But anyway, people can have phenomenally interesting lives and be very different and still like each other extremely deeply, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the lesson.
Well, there's a difference, complete and vast difference of perspective, though holding similar values.
Yeah.
And I think there's a foundational piece in your values, but not your choices and your decisions and your perspective. The values can be the same and the outcome can be completely different. And I think that makes for not just diversity, but interest and good fuel.
Yeah, and I could talk all night about
Yeah, I think I'm getting hypnosis too. I'm kind of, I may have to nap before I go to work.
Right. So yeah, you may need another pot of coffee. I have to go get my hair cut. So anyway, we'll see you next week, everyone, and thank you for being here today.
Have a great week.
Leave it at